Hello, my friend. Welcome to my channel. Capitol Hill in shock. What began as a dry budget hearing has just erupted into a political firestorm, igniting a battle for the very soul of America. The flashpoint, Speaker Mike Johnson unleashed a piercing question on humanitarian aid, cornering Rep. Jasmine Crockett. But what he didn't see coming wasn't a reasoned debate, but a table-pounding, emotional explosion broadcast live to the nation. This is no longer a war of numbers, it's a mortal combat between cold logic and a burning conscience, exposing the deep fault line dividing the country. The moment is taking the nation by storm, and Washington is reeling. Because the question is no longer about millions of dollars, it's about who gets to define the soul of America. Washington, 8 a.m. The U.S. Congressional Chamber was as tense as a bowstring. No more laughter, no more tapping of pens, only the sound of red cameras. In the middle of the coldly lit room, two figures sat facing each other. Jasmine Crockett, the congressman from Texas, his face proud but hiding a storm rolling inside, and Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, who just threw a number onto the agenda table that stunned everyone. $24.6 million for Honduras, $3.9 million for LGBTQI+ democracy grants, $2 million for gender equality funds in Africa. I just want to ask, what do Americans get out of it? Johnson's voice was like a hammer striking steel. There was no wavering, no softness. He knew that each of those numbers was not just a budget political, beliefs off the opponent, a blow not to policy, but to mentality. Mr. Johnson, she began, her voice even but with a slight tremor, you're talking about real people, not cold numbers. Where are the people? Johnson interrupted. In Honduras, in Ghana, in a land you've never been to. The room erupted in murmurs. Crockett looked at him, unblinking. We help them so we don't have to fight the flow of migrants across our own borders. We help them to protect the values America once promised. But Johnson leaned forward, her voice low, her smile faint. I just ask, why do Texans have to work 2 jobs a day, pay higher taxes to support your global dreams? A cold silence fell. Crockett gripped the microphone. No one heard her heartbeat, but everyone felt it. You are insulting, she said, insulting all who believe that humanity is not a waste. Am I insulting? Johnson said slowly. No, I am asking logic. If you believe that morality can be bought with tax money, then please tell the people what are they buying. The room erupted in response. Democrats banged on the table, a few shouted in protest. But in the center, there were only 2 people, eyes locked like 2 swords in the dark. She burst out, if we don't spend $24.6 million in Honduras, millions of people will migrate en masse to the U.S. border. Do you understand? We will face an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. That sentence made the whole audience hold their breath, silently understanding. She just blurted it out. The statement is not just a warning, it is admitting that the very spending Johnson criticized was propping up a reality the administration didn't want the public to see. Johnson tilted his head, smiling slightly. So you admit it, we're spending money not out of kindness, but out of fear of consequences? Crockett slammed his hand on the table. Don't twist my words. I'm talking about lives, not your political gain. The camera caught the moment, the burning eyes, the trembling voice, the shortness of breath. In a few seconds, everything was laid bare. The anger, the fear, the conviction, and the vulnerability. A congresswoman wasn't just arguing, she was protect the soul of your side. But for Johnson, that moment was detonation point. He leaned back in his chair, his voice even. Senator, emotions don't make policy. A simple sentence, but it felt like a stab. Crockett looked at him, not responding. Her face turned red, her eyes filled with tears. The room fell silent. Johnson had won not with arguments, but with the silence of the person across from him. CNN, Fox, and Politico all cut that part into headlines. Crockett explodes in Congress. Mike Johnson hit the Democrats' emotional weakness. Within hours, the video had gone viral. Over 10 million views in one evening. Half of America was praising her as the only one who dares to speak the truth. The other half chuckled. She was just yelling. But only those in the room that day understood the confrontation wasn't about the budget. It was the battle between reason and conscience. In the hallway after the hearing, Crockett paced quickly, flashbulbs flashing. Senator, do you think Johnson was trying to provoke? A reporter asked. She turned, her voice hoarse. He didn't provoke, he manipulated. He doesn't understand that there are things that if cut would bring the world to its knees. That became the second headline of the night. Crockett, cut those things, the world will collapse. Republicans laughed. Democrats were silent. But in that silence was something deeper, fear that she might be right, because those seemingly small expenses are propping up the silent cracks in the global landscape. Back in her office, Crockett sat in front of the glass door, watching the city glow. In the mirror, her face reflected the light of the flag outside. They think we're weak, she whispered. But if they'd lived in the slums of Honduras, heard the cries of children because of dehydration, they'd understand. Humanity is not a luxury. It's the last line of defense for civilization. Across the hall, Johnson was on Fox News. He said tersely, his voice cold, I don't have a problem with humanity. I have a problem with people who use it to cover up failure. The words seemed to end the first chapter of a political drama where two opposing soul-save chosen their positions. One believes that money can save people. One believes that money must save the country. Washington, the next morning. While the media was still busy replaying Jasmine Crockett banging on the table, a surprising detail leaked from inside the House. The entire question for Mike Johnson has been prepared for 3 weeks, with one goal to make a Democratic congressman have an emotional outburst. And the person chosen was Crockett, because she was seen as the young flame of the radical faction. Easy to flare up, hard to put out. Johnson has been targeting her, one advisor said. He's not just attacking numbers, he's attacking beliefs. He understands that for someone like Crockett, attacking the humanitarian budget is like attacking an ideal. At Democratic headquarters, an emergency meeting took place Tuesday morning. Media strategists argued fiercely. One group argued that Crockett said the right thing at the wrong time. Other groups worry that she let Johnson define the whole side. Crockett has a good heart, but she forgets that cameras are weapons here. Johnson uses them like cold scalpels, while she fights with a warm heart, said an advisor to Rep. Pelosi. But not everyone was critical. Online, the Stand With Crockett movement exploded. Thousands of people shared images of her banging on the table, accompanied by the slogan, "She stood for humanity," when they mocked it. She was no longer just a Texas congresswoman. She became a symbol for those who believe that humanity still has a place in American politics. In the middle of the night, Crockett was back in his office. His coffee was cold, his laptop screen glowing with hundreds of messages from constituents. One person wrote, "I never cared about politics until I saw her screaming for us." Another wrote, "Don't let them shut her out. She is the voice we lost." She read it all, silently. Somewhere, she knew Johnson was sleeping soundly because he had achieved what he wanted, but what he hadn't counted on was the spread of sincerity. From a fit of anger, Crockett turned in the fire, represents millions of people tired of the cold language of power. And in that silence, she whispered, "If emotion is a sin, then America has been living in sin for too long." As darkness fell on Capitol Hill, the story between Crockett and Johnson spread beyond Congress. It became a mirror of modern American politics itself. One side is about money, the other side is about people. One side calculates, one side feels. One side uses strategy, the other side uses heart. Johnson can win this battle. But Crockett unleashed what every political campaign fears most, a real feeling. And America, standing between those two fires, must ask itself, who will we choose to define morality in this iron age? A week later, Washington was still reeling. Jasmine Crockett pounding on the table became the most watched political moment of the month, surpassing even the president's speech. But it wasn't the anger that mattered more, it was the chain effect later. In Europe, television stations called it a controversy that exposes America's moral flaws. In Brussels, an EU diplomat said, when the US starts arguing about whether to fund humanitarian aid, the world knows it is tired. In South America, social organizations warn that if US aid is cut, hundreds of thousands of people may be forced to migrate. And ironically, the warning Crockett once uttered in anger is becoming a reality. At the Mexican border, the flow of asylum seekers has spiked 22% in just 2 weeks. Mexico City reporters ran headlines, "The American debate becomes our crisis." A quote by Crockett, seemingly hyperbolic, now resonates with reality. Within Washington, the reaction was polarized. Conservatives declared victory. Johnson has exposed the Democrats' reliance on international spending. But while they celebrated, humanitarian organizations warned that aid cuts will lead to a new generation of crises, from migration to climate change. An analysis by the Brookings Institution states $24.6 million in Honduras is not a waste, but a cost of prevention. If the humanitarian fire is extinguished, the price will be cross-border caravans, food crises, and widespread political instability. Meanwhile, on social media, the divide has turned into a battle line. Half of America has hailed Johnson as the first person to say it straight: tax dollars are for Americans first. The other half protects Crockett, seeing her as the last beacon of compassion. Two images, two Americas coexisting in one entity. A superpower is debating whether humanity is still worth it. What no one expected was that Crockett's anger would become a symbol that transcended party lines. Crockett has kept a low profile. The press says she's sheltering from the storm, but according to those close to her, she's not quiet. She's preparing a big speech called The Price of Compassion. In that speech, she said a line that brought Washington to its feet. If humanity is your weakness, then remember, every empire falls not for lack of strength, but for lack of heart. That saying spread around the world. From Nairobi to New Delhi, from Toronto to Paris, newspapers called it a lesson for a century eroded by calculation. She became the international face of American political conscience, even in his home country, and is still considered hot-tempered. Mike Johnson may be right on the argument. But Jasmine Crockett is right on human nature. She doesn't speak to win, she speaks to remind that power cannot exist apart from compassion. In the end, the biggest question is no longer who is right, who is wrong, but can America be both strong and humane? Is it possible to cut spending and still retain the global heart? Or, when numbers become the only measure, will humanity disappear from politics? In the final CBS newscast, the anchor said, "The Crockett-Johnson debate went beyond one session. It became a mirror of the world. When we see compassion as weakness, strength becomes violence." Crockett walking out of the Capitol in a light rain. She said nothing, just looked up at the Capitol, where the dim light reflected off the clouds. Every civilization has a moment of choice, between steel and heart, between profit and humanity, between reason and humanity. The question is no longer who won in the boardroom that day, but who will define the soul of America in this century? The truth doesn't spread on its own. It needs those who dare to share it. If you believe justice and humanity still deserve to be heard, share and subscribe so this voice won't be buried in the noise. Every share you make is a brick laid for a real democracy.